My name is Zachary Gersten. I'm the technical manager for this session on measuring empowerment in nutrition-sensitive agricultural development projects using the pro-WEAI that's chaired by Agnes Weissenbeek. Thank you so much for taking part in ANH 2021, and we really look forward to today's robust and interactive session. Just a quick reminder that everything that you might need to access is on the ANH Academy website. So conference materials, our program, all of that can be found at anh-academy.org/ANH2021. So before Agnes takes the conversation forward, I have a few technical announcements to make sure our experience together is as smooth and as interactive as possible. First, this session is being recorded right now, and after ANH week, we'll post it on our website for viewing later. As you all have entered, participants have been muted, but we encourage you to introduce yourself via the chat. Let us know your name, where you're coming from, what organization you might be representing or working with, and then later on in the session, we'll have a Q&A or discussion session. We encourage you to use your webcam if you feel comfortable, but if your connection's bad or or anything, definitely turn it off, and that won't interfere with your participation in the session. Later on, we'll open up the conversation, but if you have any questions throughout, please share them during the chat box, and we'll do our best to address them as the session goes on. And if you have any technical issues, double check your audio and double check your internet connection. You can always reconnect and come right back in using the same Zoom link and password. And if you have any technical questions, please direct them to me in the chat. Thanks so much, and handing it over to Agnes.
Zach, good day, everyone. Welcome to this learning lab on measuring empowerment in nutrition-sensitive agricultural development projects using ProWhere. My name is Agnes Weissenbeek, and I'm a Senior Research Fellow from IFPRI. So for many of you, the ProWhere is not going to be something new. It's familiar territory, as we have had learning labs on Weia and ProWhere at almost all the ANH Academy weeks. This will be the second time we're doing something virtually. And so over the years, as you know, many things have changed, and we now have actually an indicator that we can present in full. But rather than go through the whole sweep of 12 indicators, this year we're doing a deep dive into one aspect of ProWhere, time use, because of its importance in agriculture and nutrition. What we are going to do is use the time use module and qualitative and quantitative work around time use to illustrate how you can use ProWhere in assessing empowerment in nutrition-sensitive agricultural projects. So I would like now to hand this over to Ara, who is managing our session. And so now over to you, Ara.
Thanks, Agnes. Hi, everyone. My name is Ara Go. I'm the program manager on the Weia team. So before I start, I'll put a Google Doc link in the chat. So that when you open the Google Doc, you will see the agenda and the table and the links to the session presentations and materials we'll be using today. So you can just have it open throughout the session. And I'll quickly walk us through the agenda now before we start the more fun, interesting quiz session. So during the first 20 minutes, thanks, Hazel. During the first 20 minutes, we're going to do a quiz to review what we've learned during the online course. And following this 20-minute intro, we're going to have 4 mini sessions for 20 minutes each. And there are survey module, computing an indicator, qualitative work, and interpreting quant and qual data with a small group discussion. And we'll have a little stretch break before this group discussion session at the end. And we'll end with sharing some reflections and feedback from you and some final words from Hazel on behalf of the Weia team. So one thing to note is that, as Zach mentioned, that given the really tight schedule, we didn't set aside any time for Q&A. So if you have any questions and comments, please type them in the chat box so our team can address them throughout the session. Next slide. So on the next slide, I put together some pictures of our team members since we don't have time for each of us to introduce ourselves. So here's the IFPRI Weia team and our collaborators, Audrey and Dee. Next slide. Okay, so it's quiz time. So I hope you all did your homework. And the winner of this quiz will have a prize. It's a free enrollment of one other ProWEAI module that will be forthcoming. So currently, as you all probably saw, that there is only one module available on the website, which was free for everyone. But we plan to develop some more paid and instructor-led, more interactive training modules in the next couple of years. So winner will get the free enrollment in one of those modules. So we'll do this short quiz using a live polling platform called Slido. So everybody has your device open, and you can just open another browser, internet browser, and go to slido.com and enter the event code ANH23. So you can use your laptop or cell phone or tablet, any device that's connected to internet. So while you're doing that, I'll share my screen. So it's just in case that you're not participating in the quiz. Okay. Yes, please. Okay. Great. So.
And it's slido.com.
Yes.
I was just going to put it back in the chat.
Slido.com. Yep.
And then ANH23.
Yep. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. So it's both in the chat as well as on the screen, and I hope you can see that. So and I'll be helping out Ara in running this running the quiz.
Thanks, Hazel. So do you all see my screen? The blue screen. Yes.
Yeah, you can put a thumbs up or send us a reaction.
Yeah, so this is a warm-up question that's not part of the quiz. So where are you joining us from? So you can just put your city, locations, country, just as a practice of using Slido.
Looks like everybody is very good at
it. Nice. All right, so Forest Row, Boston. Oh, we've got a lot of people in Boston. Yeah. DC.
New Zealand. Oh, it must be very late. Thank you for making the time.
Ann Arbor, Ghana, Kampala, Nairobi. Yeah, all over the world. Great. So just quickly, so we're going to have a mini quiz with 8 multiple choice questions. And each of them, I set the timer to start a 30 seconds countdown. So remember, 30 seconds go by very quickly. So you have to pay attention to all the questions. And Hazel will play some background music during the quiz, so it can be more fun and lively. So yeah.
And then at the end of every question, we'll show you the right answer. And then if you have any questions around, maybe if the right answer was not very clear, just put that in the chat and then we can collect them and address them later. So.
Yes. So if you have any questions during the quiz or any difficulty with the technical issues, also put it in the chat box, please. All right. So let's get started. Yeah. So this page. Yeah. So ready? I'm going to move over to the first question. Ready, set, go. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, wow. All right. So we have 44% of people said benefits women, and the right answer is reaches women. Okay, we'll probably talk about this later. So but next question. Ready, set, go.
I'm trying to adjust the music. Is that better? Okay.
Okay, 100% in power. Answer is yay. Good job, everybody.
Nice. Too
Nice.
easy. Too easy.
Yeah, I guess.
Everybody's gonna get a free enrollment. Let's make it a little harder.
Yep, moving on. Ready, set, go. Okay, so 90% benefit. The answer is yay.
Benefit.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good job,
that's
everyone.
benefit. Yep. Moving on
All
to
right.
the next question.
Moving on.
Ready, set, go.
Go.
It's a long question.
Right. The quicker you answer, the higher the score.
Okay, so we have a lot of people chose B and D. The right answers are, yay, B and D.
B and D.
Good job, everybody. All right, moving on.
D, but everybody got
yes.
it. A lot of people got it. Good.
Yep, good, good. Okay, next question. Ready, set, go. Can be a little tricky. All right. So the answer is B. Yay, good job,
Great.
everybody. 90% of people
Yeah,
got right.
Fantastic. Yep.
All right. Moving on. Next question. Ready, set, go. Okay, I thought this was a really easy question. And 96%, yes. Okay, so good job. All right, next question. Ready, set, go.
Last two questions.
Yes. Okay, so it's blocked by this bar, but most of you chose the last option, all of the above, and the right answer is yes, all of the above. Yep.
Okay,
great job, everybody. All right, so we have one last question. Yes, it's about qualitative methods. All right.
Speed, maybe.
Yes, also a long question.
Trying to win. Yeah.
Are you ready? Okay, ready, set, go. So we have A, B, and D. Most of the people chose them for the right answers. Yay. So the right answer are A, B, and D. Good job, everybody.
Great.
So this is it. And let me announce the winner of the quiz. Drum roll, please. So the winner is, okay, Surendran. Congratulations. Yay. Woo.
You can
Yeah,
show your
great job.
appreciation
Yes.
with,
Just, yes.
with your reactions.
Great.
Or in the chat. Well done.
Well done,
Straight out
Surendran.
of the gate.
Yeah, we're going to
Fantastic.
reach out to you with the prize after the session. Okay, so let me stop sharing my screen. Just go back to this. Sorry about this.
Do we want to move on to the next session, Ara?
Yep. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just looking for the option of stop sharing my screen. Okay, so thanks everyone. I hope you all enjoyed this icebreaker quiz and reminded you of some of the content that we've gone through on the course. And again, if you have any questions about any of the quiz questions, just feel free to ask in the chat. Then now I'll hand it over to Hazel to open up the first main session of the Learning Lab, how to administer the survey module. Over to you,
Okay.
Hazel.
Great, thank you, Ara. And for this part, Simone will be assisting. And go ahead and start getting started on what you're sharing, Simone. Okay, so now let's move on to our first learning session, which is going to be a deep dive on how to implement the ProWEAI time use module. We will be showing you a video clip of an interview, and your task is to listen and observe. The entire video is going to last for about 8 minutes. So so it'll be about 8 minutes. And then when we come back, you'll get a chance to share your reactions. So for your reference, we have also prepared a short narrative about Mary, the respondent, as well as a correctly filled out questionnaire for the time use module based on this interview. We will share those links in the chat shortly. They should also be in that Google Doc that Ara shared earlier. So good to have those references handy. Is that clear, everybody? What's going to happen next? So as always, if you run into any problems, please use the chat to let us know. And are we? It looks like we're ready, Simone, right? So get ready to listen and observe. Let's begin. Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Are you
Yes.
seeing the video?
I do see the screen, yes.
Are you seeing the video or are you seeing the PowerPoint? I'm
seeing the video.
Great, perfect, excellent. Okay, here we go.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this time use video demonstration for the ProWEAI time use module. My name is Hazel Malapit. I'm Senior Research Coordinator at IFPRI. And for this demonstration, I'll be playing the role of Mary, the respondent.
Hi, my name is Simone Foss. I'm a research analyst at IFPRI. And for this demonstration, I'll be playing the role of the enumerator. And let's begin. All right. Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for speaking with me. So, you know, we're about halfway through the survey now, so I have a few more questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'd like to ask you about how you spent your time during the past 24 hours. So we'll begin from yesterday morning and we'll continue through to this morning. This is going to be a very detailed account of how you spent your time. And I'm interested in everything you did, resting and sleeping, eating, working inside and outside of the home, caring for children, cooking, everything you did, even if it didn't take you very much time. I'm very interested in agricultural activities such as farming, gardening, livestock raising, whether it was in the field or it was close to your house in the village. And I'm also interested in how much time you spent caring for children. I see you've got one there with you right now. And especially if it happened while you did some other activity, like while you were collecting water, if you had a child with you, or if you were cooking while watching over children. So let's start with yesterday morning. Do you remember what time you woke up?
Yeah, so I usually wake up at sunrise.
Okay, great. So that's around 5:30 here. Great. Okay. And then do you remember what time you went to bed last night?
Yeah, so I go to bed after the radio show. My husband usually listens to this very popular radio show. And
Okay.
then
Do you
after that, I
remember?
went to bed.
Okay, great. Do you know which radio show it was?
So it's the man with the booming voice. He has very beautiful booming voice. He's very popular. All everybody I know listens to him.
Okay, yeah, I
Yes.
think that's the BBC Zambia radio show.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that usually runs until about 9 p.m. Okay, so and you went to bed right after the show ended?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, great. So you woke up at sunrise, and what did you do after that?
So when I woke up, I washed my face, and then I went to the borehole to get some water.
Okay, and about how much time do you think you spent at the borehole and bringing the water back to your house? Is the borehole far from your house?
It's a very quick walk, but we usually need to go several times, and there's a long line sometimes. And yesterday there was very long line, so probably took us an hour.
Okay. Okay, great. And were you alone, or did you have a helper?
Yeah, so he helped me, and I had the baby as well.
Okay, you had both of them. Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. So that took you about an hour. So let's say you got done at maybe 6:30. And then once you were back at your house with water, what did you do after that?
Yeah, so when we come back, then I have to cook some breakfast, prepare the breakfast, and help the kids, feed the kids, and help them get ready for school.
Okay. And so which ones go to school?
Yeah, so I have my two older kids. I have another
Okay.
daughter who also goes to school.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah.
And about what time do they go to school?
Yeah, so they usually leave around 7:30. Their school usually starts at 8.
I don't get it.
What is it?
I don't get it.
What is it, sweetie?
I don't get what you're saying.
Oh, you don't
Oh.
understand. I'm pretending to be married.
Okay, great.
It's a different school.
So he usually heads off around 7:30, and then so after he goes off to school with his sister, what do you do?
Yeah, and then once the kids are in school, once the kids left the house to go to school, then I have to clean up a little bit, and then get ready to go to the field. Yeah, so.
Okay. Do you spend a lot of time cleaning up, or maybe 15?
Yeah, maybe like 15-20 minutes.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. And then how long does it take you to get out to your field?
So the field is about 20-minute walk here, and I yeah, and then I leave around, I don't know, I guess I leave around 8 or something.
Okay, and then once you're in the field, are you there by yourself, or you said did you say that you joined your husband in the field?
Yeah, so he goes, he goes straight to the field to get an early start, and then I join him after the kids are in school.
Okay, so your two oldest have gone to school, but do you have your youngest with you, or is she being cared for by another relative or a friend?
No, I have to carry her with me. So
okay, so you have her with her the whole time you were in the field yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then
almost.
I know sorry, we'll try to get through this as quickly. I know your time's valuable, so we'll try to go continue as quickly as we can.
You can do your post if you want.
So how long until what time were you in the field?
Yeah, so yesterday we stayed until after midday.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, so we couldn't finish until after midday. So.
And what kind of activities were you doing in the field?
Yeah, so we're preparing the field to plant our maize crop because the rain's about to come. So
okay,
we want to make sure the field is ready.
Okay, great. And then so you were, let's say maybe you were there until maybe about 13 hours, about 1 p.m. Sounds like that, a little after midday.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
once you
maybe
came
like
back,
1:30. Yeah.
oh, okay. Okay, great. And then after you came back to your house and you left, or you actually left the fields, where did you go and what did you do?
Yeah, so we went home and then I had to make lunch for myself and my husband.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Mary. I think we're going to take a little pause here and continue the
Okay.
survey another time. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. Right now, that's the end of our interview for the purpose of this demonstration. If you'd like to see the full time allocation from how Mary spent her day, please see the accompanying documents, and that lays out exactly what she did from the time she woke up until the time she went to bed. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Great, thank you. Hi, and thanks everybody for your patience and for listening in. So I think before we go to the next part where Simone is going to take us through some tips and good practices, just reflecting on, some of you have already started doing this, but just to give you a minute or two to reflect on what you heard, and whatever observations you see. Were there kind of good practices that you observed? Any sort of potential problems? Just your general reactions. And I noticed that there were already some comments around whether the sunrise was obvious to be 5:30, and so on. Whether people use clock time, that sort of thing. So if you have any other observations, we'll give you a minute to reflect and write your thoughts in the chat. Okay, so I see Jen is saying the interviewing style was friendly, it's appropriate, so it goes to the narration sort of storytelling approach that we recommend. Thanks for observing that. Anyone else? Right, so local enumerators who can easily identify the time, markers like the radio show. So yes, so definitely it's an advantage to make sure your enumerators understand these common sort of time markers in the community. Lots of probing, right? So this does require, so implementing this module does require a lot of training. So that is certainly true. For those of you who joined late, don't worry. We are recording everything, and there is a Google Doc that has all the resources. So I'm sure you can catch up later. Okay, so that's great. So I think those are all great observations. So now I think I can pass them back to Simone to take us through some of the tips, some of the things you've already observed. Go ahead, Simone.
Great, thank you. So yeah, absolutely. As some of you observed, there are a few important things that we're going to discuss about administering the time use module. As Hazel mentioned and Agnes mentioned, this time use module is used to calculate the work balance indicator in the ProWEAI. And there are a few key tips that, again, some of you have already observed were brought out in that interview. So one of the first key tips is that the enumerator should first ask the respondent what time he or she woke up the previous day, and then fill in any time before that as the sleeping or resting activity code. And then next, the enumerator can ask what time the respondent went to bed, and then they know the time that they're supposed to fill in, from what time they woke up to what time they went to bed. So right away. And this is a common problem that we see, that maybe they don't capture the correct time somebody went to bed, and then things get kind of funny at the end of the day when calculating how many hours spent on certain activities. So then, as the respondent is narrating their day and describing the activities they did, the enumerator should ask, were you also taking care of children while at this time or while you were doing this activity? And the enumerator should check the box that is underneath the activity code and that you would see in the form. And if the respondent was also caring for a child while doing something else. So even if the respondent is not actively caring for or interacting with the child, like maybe the child is sleeping or snoozing or doing something else nearby, as long as they're responsible for the child during that time, it should still be counted as yes. Yeah, and the box should be checked for the right time interval. Next, depending on the context, and this is where the local enumerator familiarity comes into play, is it may also be very useful to use common time markers to help respondents recall activities in relation to other events that happen. So I asked about the time children go to school, or does somebody always take lunch at a certain time? In some cultures, it might be the set times of prayer throughout the day, or being familiar with the sunrise and sunset, or in this case also the radio shows. So having those time benchmarks to verify what happened throughout the day, because a lot of people aren't wearing watches or checking their phones. Next, so talking about filling out the module, and in the Google Doc, there is a filled out colored version, just like what you're seeing here, but the full page of it. And so it's really important that that there's no blank time interval, so that every time interval, every 15-minute segment has an activity assigned to it. And only one activity can be marked for each time period in that box. So don't leave any blank. And if any activity is done for longer periods of time, beyond 15 minutes, then the same activity code should be repeated for the duration. So an easy example is the sleeping. So for every time interval before somebody woke up, they were sleeping or resting. And for every time interval, once they went to bed, they're sleeping or resting. Or in Mary's case, she went to the field starting at about 8 in the morning, and she was there until about 1:30. So that entire block of time is considered a farming and agricultural time activity. You should never have more than one activity marked for a time period. If you're using a computer version like CAPI, it's going to have constraints from letting you add more than one activity per time period. But in case you're using a paper survey, this is important to keep in mind. And if the respondent was doing multiple things at the same time, maybe eating breakfast while listening to the radio, ask the respondent which activity was the primary focus, and enter that activity code for the appropriate time period. If an activity is completed for the majority, or for the majority of 15 minutes, say at least 8 minutes, then that entire box could be marked for that activity. However, if an activity is only completed for less than about 8 minutes, like Mary woke up and she quickly washed her face and got dressed, then she can just move, then that doesn't count as an activity and you can just move on. And if something is up to about 20 minutes, that still is only one marker, but then once it's about 25 minutes or more, you can use 2 time intervals. And that's just a rule of thumb for how to fill that out. And then the activity codes are a really essential part of making sure that everything is recorded correctly. And it's important for the enumerator to be very familiar with the activity codes, to fill out the right code as the respondent explains their day. And when a respondent describes many activities in a short period of time, such as their morning routine is, doing X, Y, Z, then the enumerator must use their best judgment to figure out which categories the majority of the activities belong to. So there's a personal care activity code, and there's domestic work. Okay, so she cleaned up, she swept the floor, she put the dishes away, she put the kids' clothes away. So that can be categorized as domestic work and other things like that. So, having the correct codes is really important. And if we don't have the right codes, then it's going to be really difficult to properly calculate that work balance indicator. Do we have any questions right now? I can't see the chat box, so while I'm sharing my screen.
Great. Thank you, Simone, for going through all of those. So I want to go back to either Jessica or somebody, whoever is monitoring the chat. Is there Agnes, Ruth? Did you have something that you think we needed to bring up? We have a few more minutes for Q&A.
So Hazel, there's a question here that why can't you have more than one activity in a time block? And I tried to answer it using our previous work that showed that it is difficult to implement it in the field, but the question here is that multiple activities at a time is more realistic, and choosing only one will change the findings. And also there's also this issue about the underreporting of care.
Yeah. So actually, our main concern is the underreporting of care, especially when we're looking at gender issues, right? So this is actually the most important problem we want to solve or minimize measurement error on in this module. In the original Weia, we had the primary and secondary activities, but even then care was always underreported, and that's why we transitioned into just doing this checkbox on did you also care for children. It's not a complete way to capture secondary activities, because here we're just capturing care as a secondary activity, but we thought this actually did better than trying to account for all kinds of secondary activities. Also remember that this module is used to construct one indicator in the entire ProWEAI, so the work balance indicator, and we're just looking at whether a person crosses a threshold. And what we found was that whether or not we collect the separate secondary activity, if somebody was already overworked, they remain overworked whether or not we collect secondary activities. And so we felt comfortable sort of just transitioning to a simplified, just the primary activity time use diary. So that's the answer to that one. Ara, do we have another time for one more question?
Yes, go ahead. You have 1 minute left.
Any other questions you'd like me to answer in plenary team, or? And if not, I would just emphasize the importance of training. I think the teams that have sort of really been able to collect time use very well are those who invest sufficient time for enumerators to understand how to classify activities, and that's really where a lot of the time is wasted when an enumerator does not know, when somebody says I went to the field, what code to include or how to classify that. That's a lot of time wasted. So the better if they memorize the codes and really internalize, you know, everything that a respondent throws at them, they know how to code, then it makes it go much more quickly. Okay, so I think we will end it there, and then please keep going with the chat. Thanks so much for the engagement, and I'll pass back to Ara to take us through the next session.
Yes, thank you, Simone, and thank you, Hazel, so much for this great session. I think without further ado, we're going to move on to the next session, which is computing and indicators. Chloe, you ready?
Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe van Bouillon. I'm one of the research analysts on the IFRI team, working mostly on the quantitative side, on the index construction and things like that. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to take you through how to compute an indicator using our do files. Okay. Great. So how do you calculate the ProWhere? You do this using the do files that we have created for you. Our do files do the full calculation from beginning to start. But in order to use them, your data must be in the correct format. So this includes the standard variable names, as well as consistent coding of the values of the variables. And I'll show you what I mean by that in the next slide. So you can find the details of the data, how the data needs to be formatted in an Excel spreadsheet that we've created. It's called Variable Names and Codebook. There's a link in this presentation that you can use. We'll also be sharing it with you via the Google Doc with the agenda. There's a link there that you can use to download this document, or you can find it on the Weia Resource Center. It's a bit of a mouthful. So let's continue with the example of looking at work balance and have a look at how the do files work for this indicator. So this is how the Excel sheet looks. For each indicator, we have its own sheet. And can you still hear me? I got a notification that my internet connection is unstable.
Yes,
We hear you.
You are loud and clear.
We can
Great.
hear you. You might want to switch which screen you are displaying because we're seeing the main screen plus your next slide. But
yeah, presenter.
Oh, are you?
if you
the note
switch,
Oh.
yeah, if you switch which screen you're showing or which is the primary, then we'll see this larger.
It might be the display settings on the top. There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you. I didn't realize you were all seeing that. That was just me. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, better.
I'm sure the
Thank you.
text is nice and big now. Okay, so how the Excel file looks is that it will give you exactly what the variable name needs to be for the do file. So this needs to be very exact. You know, uppercase and lowercase matters, spacing, underscores. The variable names need to match perfectly for the do files to work. It'll outline to you what question number this is in the module, and then importantly, it'll tell you what kind of format the variable should take. So in the case of the time use module, this will take the form of a code from A to Z, which aligns with the activity that the person indicated. So let's look at an example of how this data looks. So this is just looking at the data once I've opened it in Stata. The first variable here gives the household identifier. So you'll see that for household 1, we have 2 individuals, member 1 and member 2, a male and a female. And then for the time use module, you'll see there's different variables for each of the 15-minute slots that we asked the respondent about. And the variable's value is the code that corresponds to the activity that they reported. So A was sleeping. You'll see a lot of people reported sleeping for the first few time slots. C was personal care. P was cooking. So these need to be recorded as this numeric within the data set. Sorry, not numeric, the letters within the data set. Okay, so now that we know how to structure our data, let's talk about what the do files actually do. They go through a few different steps. The first is they use the indicator adequacy definitions, which you all know from the ProWhere course, to create a binary variable for each respondent for each indicator. So they'll either be coded as 0 if they're inadequate in an indicator, or 1 if they're adequate. And then from these, we can aggregate these scores to understand the person's empowerment score, which is the sum of their adequacies. So we look at how many of these they're adequate in, how many they're inadequate in, and we can calculate their empowerment score. The do files then apply the empowerment cutoff to classify individuals as either empowered or disempowered. And from there, we can calculate the 3DE and the gender parity index. And finally, we can use these to calculate the ProWhere. So there's 3 do files that execute this whole process. And you can find them all at the Weia Resource Center. We've also added some to the Google Doc for you, so you can download them from there and give it. We've added some data for you, so you can give this whole process a try on your own. So once you've checked that all your variable names and formats are correct, you're ready to run the do files. So let's have a look at what you need to do to run these do files. Oh, sorry. First, we're going to have a look at the process that the 3 do files follow. So the first do file, you input your raw data. And this do file is the indicator calculator. So it calculates each of the 12 indicators, and it creates a new data set, which includes all of the indicators and this binary variable as to whether an individual is adequate or inadequate in each indicator. This data set is then fed into the second do file, the index construction do file. This do file uses the data on the indicators to construct the gender parity index, the 3DE, and finally the ProWEAI. And then this do file creates the final data set, which is the index data set. This includes all of the indicators as well as the final headline scores, the 3DE, the ProWhere, the gender parity index. Then the final do file is used to create standard tables and charts. And you feed in this final index data set into this do file, and it'll produce figures and charts for you. Great. Okay, so how do we run the do files? The process of running the do files is the same for all three of these do files that I've outlined, and there's 4 very easy steps. First, you need to change the working directory to the file on your computer where your ProWhere data is stored. So this is your raw data. Then you change the project name to your own project's name. You make sure that you change the name of the data file to the name of your specific data file, and then you're ready to run. So here's a screenshot of this first bit of the do file that needs to be edited. And so the first step is to change this line, which is your working directory. So you'll see that for me, I had a file IFPRI, and then ANH Learning Labs, and then finally State Tutorial. And this is where I save my raw data. Then here's where you change your project name. So I've simply used ANH2021 as my project name. And finally, you need to change the data set to be exactly what your data set is called. And the naming needs to be exact for all 3 of these steps. So my data set's called ANH2021 ProWhere Clean. Once you've edited these 3 lines to reflect your personal files and data set, you're ready to run. And again, we've given you these do files and data sets so you can practice this on your own after the session. Okay, so let's go into the work balance indicator and look at the actual code that we use for that indicator. You'll remember that an individual is considered adequate in this indicator if they work less than 10.5 hours a day. And we consider their workload any time spent on a primary activity working, plus any time spent in childcare is weighted by a half and added to this time. So this is what our code looks like. We use the minutes spent in each of the codes that are classified as work. So you'll see that, for example, code A is not included because that's sleeping, it's not considered work. And all of these codes here are the activities that are counted as work. So we add these all up to find the number of minutes the individual spends working every day. And then to find their workload, we take this time and we add the time they spend in childcare as a secondary activity, weighted by a half, and we divide by 60 to get to hours. Then finally, we just need to check whether this total workload is below or under 10.5 hours to understand if the individual is adequate or not. So let's look at an example in the data. So again, here we have our household 1 with 2 individuals, and we see that the husband reported 600 minutes of time spent working in total and 0 minutes spent in childcare. So we find that his workload is 10 hours, and because this is below 10.5 hours, we find that he is adequate in work balance. When we look at the female respondent in this household, we see that she reported 615 minutes spent working and 270 minutes spent doing childcare as a secondary activity. So when we take these two and weight the childcare by half, we find that she worked for 12.5 hours, which is over 10.5 hours, and she is considered inadequate in work balance. She is coded as 0. Okay, so that was an example of one indicator. And what the do files will then do is follow a similar process for all other 11 indicators to understand if an individual is adequate or inadequate in each of the 12 indicators. We can then create the empowerment score for this person, which is the weighted sum of their adequacies. And finally, apply the empowerment cutoff, which is 75% of indicators or more. So let's have a quick look at what this looks like in the data. So here we see that these variables here with the names cut off, these are the 12 indicators. So we see for the first respondent here, the male in household 1, he is adequate in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 indicators. And as we know, our cutoff of 75% translates to 9 indicators. So he only has 7 adequacies, which is below the cutoff of 9. And we therefore classify him as disempowered. He's not empowered. And we find that his empowerment score is 58%, which is equivalent to 6 over that, calculate that right. Sorry, 7. He has 7 adequacies, 7 out of the 12, which gets him a score of 58%. And we follow this process for each individual in the data set. Okay, then finally, once we have an empowerment score for each individual, we can go ahead and the do files will calculate our 3D score for us. We can understand what % of our sample achieves empowerment. We can have a look at what the 3D score is for individuals that are disempowered, as well as our gender parity index and the number of households that achieve gender parity, as well as the gap between female and male respondents within the same household. Then finally, we would like to calculate our ProWhere. This is a weighted aggregate of the 3DE score and the GPI. The 3D is weighted 90% and the GPI is weighted 10%. So using the scores we found in our data, we can simply calculate the ProWhere, and this gives us our full set of headline results for the ProWhere. This table is also created with our do files for you. So that's the end of this session. The slides do have some important do file variables for you to have a look at it in the end when you download the slideshow. And just to highlight some breaking news, 2 of these indicators in a more recent version of the ProWhere will be dropped. So we'll be down to 10 indicators to try to decrease the survey length.
Okay, thanks, Chloe, so much for the session. Since we have about 3 or 4 extra minutes left for this session, does anyone from the Weia team want to talk a little bit about this indicator dropping? Because I think we just got some questions about that. Ruth?
Yeah, okay. Agnes and Hazel or others on the index team. First of all, if I'm not mistaken, it's the threshold would be 80%. Is that correct, Chloe? With the 10 indicators? Yeah.
Yes.
And then the other point is that with why we dropped the household respect, I think the simple answer is it didn't work very well, but one of the reasons it didn't work very well is that often it wasn't clear who was the other household member that was being referred to. And that will vary a lot. In some cases, the mother-in-law or, in-laws may be more important than the spouse, or, the whole complex of things was a big reason for dropping that. The not dropping the membership in influential groups, we put that in because the collective agency indicators are very thin. There were only, originally only one, then we added to make 2. But if you aren't a member of a group, you can't be a member of an influential group. There was a lot of confusion about what is an influential group. We are now in the process of trying to develop better collective agency indicators that might be used for those who are really wanting to get more into collective agency, like myself. So over to others.
Anyone on the Weia team would like to chime in and add anything to this? Okay, I think we're good. So just anyone, if you have any more questions about this particular change in the ProWEAI, or any other questions from Chloe's presentation, just feel free to just continue adding to the chat box. I see a lot of questions and discussion going on in the chat. It's very lively. So let's just keep going with that. And I think I will have Emily and Dee for the qualitative session. Emily, are you ready?
I am ready.
Yeah,
So
let's move on.
I will share my screen. And everyone should see me in presenting mode now, I do believe. Okay, great. So moving right along, I'll be doing the talking today, and Dee, of course, feel free to chime in, but just for the sake of time, I'll be the main presenter for today. But so without further ado, first, real quick, why do we even want to use qualitative methods, given how stellar the presentations from Simone and Hazel and Chloe were about the quantitative index? Well, firstly, really our qualitative methods will help us understand the context more deeply. So that includes understanding the gender relationships in the area, understanding the project, whether that's a project implementer or a project beneficiary, just understanding the respondents' lives, their motivations, what they prioritize, what they value, as well as understanding the quantitative results. And Annette, I remember your question earlier about seasonality, and that'll kind of come up in a minute. So in the suite of the qualitative ProWEAI protocols, we have, several of them, but for the purposes of looking at the work balance indicator more closely today, we'll focus on what we call a seasonal calendar, focus group discussions, life histories, which are a type of in-depth interview. And we also just want to reiterate that, when you're looking through our qualitative protocols for ProWEAI, they are qualitative. You should adapt them as needed for your project and for your study interests. So the first tool is the seasonal calendar. And the purpose of the seasonal calendar is to show how production responsibilities are distributed by gender and how seasonal variation affects time use for women and men. So if I recall, it was Annette who had asked during the time use module demonstration, well, how do you account for seasonality? Well, if you collect a seasonal calendar, you'll be able to look at when you collected the quantitative data and see where it falls. So you can see if it falls in, a more time burdened season or not. But anyway, so for the seasonal calendars, we encourage people to have groups of 4 to 5 individuals, just so we can reach a general consensus of what is typical for that area, and particularly to have sex segregated groups of women and men as appropriate for a study context. So on the bottom of the screen here, this is just a screen grab from the sample we would have available online. But this is actually a photo from a project from Ghana. So you can see what it looks like, when actually implemented. So you can see on the far left, there's all of the different crops, and then they have, men, women, girls, and boys to account for gender and age as it was appropriate for this project. And then going across the top, you can see the calendar months. And as you can see, it looks like things really start to pick up come, May through October. So, if you collected your baseline data in January and you collected follow-up data in August, you would actually be able to look at the quantitative results and the differences and say like, oh, well, August was a lot busier than January, for instance. So moving right along to discussing our focus group discussions. So the purpose of the focus group discussions is really just to illuminate the variation across a group. And regarding work balance, it kind of shows up in introductory questions where we just ask, can you tell us a little bit about men and women in your community? What do people do? We're really just saying, like how do people spend their days, how they spend their time. This can also come up when we talk about local understandings of, or ask about local understandings of empowerment. Where we ask, can you describe a woman or a man in your community who's able to make important decisions and put them into action? I.e., can they actually do what they want to do with the time they do or don't have? And then finally, some examples from a project in Malawi where we had adapted our existing pro-WEAI qualitative protocols. We have 3 questions there on the bottom. Asking, which agricultural decisions do men and women typically make together? So, how do they decide how they spend their time and share responsibilities and duties? How has participation in the project changed the way those decisions are made? And, when people disagree about how to spend their time on agriculture, what do they disagree about? Next up, life histories. So life histories are great for illustrating change over time, as in one's lifetime, hence it's a life history, on important issues. So sometimes that work balance indicator shows up as just asking, what are the things you can and can't do because of your gender? Are there certain types of people who can't do those things? How do you feel about it? Also, we have some questions specifically for women, and we ask, are there things that you want to do? Like, how do you want to spend your time, but you can't do because of your gender? And, just follow-up probing questions as appropriate for that. And then again, a real world adaptation, again, comes from that example in Malawi, where we ask, did you or somebody else decide what you did today? And if there's a disagreement about who will do what task, how they will spend their time, how do you decide? And then one of the more interesting questions, and we'll talk about this a bit more in later slides, is just, when women have more control over their time, like in their life, before marriage, when they're single, after marriage, when they have children, old age, that sort of thing. So continuing right along, so the next few slides will just give you a little sampling of the different kinds or the different findings related to work balance that we found using the qualitative protocols from pro-WEAI. So firstly, thinking about constraints on time agency. The amount of work is a really obvious one, and I'm sure we can all relate, from the times when we're overburdened at work and in our personal lives. But so this example from Molly is just a woman saying, there's no rest. You get up and you work all day long until you go to sleep. Another constraint for women is the perceptions of what is considered work. And this was true in a few contexts we've looked at. But what we found was that some things aren't considered work, like household duties. So you might have a couple where work is shared pretty evenly between men and women, but women will still have to do all those other things that aren't considered work. But because it's not work, she doesn't really have any negotiating power, the ability to redistribute it, because it's not work. And then, of course, I'm sure this finding is unsurprising. There's gendered norms around divisions of labor. And so here's an instance from Kenya where a woman was explaining how, you know, in her community, if you find a man doing the dishes, you know, people will speak badly of that family because, you know, the woman is controlling the man. But that's a constraint then, because women can only do what they're supposed to do, you know, and men won't help them. Next up, thinking about influences on women's work balance. Season is an obvious one. I'm sure you can recall the photo from a few slides ago about you know, how much busier everyone gets later in the year. Men's migration is an interesting one too. In some contexts, women will say, oh yes, my husband migrates, you know, to the city, and I actually enjoy it because I have a lot more agency over deciding what to do and when to do it, because she doesn't have to consult her husband because he's away from the household. But in other contexts, women say they don't like it because suddenly they have to do all of his work and all of her work, so she feels overburdened. So there's variety there, some variation there. Life cycle, also interesting. In this example from Molly, a woman is explaining how as her daughters grew up and were able or were old enough to help her with the household work, she's been able to delegate some of the chores to them. And as a result, she can actually see to her financial needs because she has more time to focus on generating income. So she feels like she has, you know, more control over her work balance. There's also household structure. So this example from Nepal is about how a young woman and her husband left their extended household and formed their own nuclear household. And as a result, she no longer had to consult her mother-in-law or take orders from her mother-in-law about what to do. So she was enjoying the freedom of influencing her own work balance. The last point on this slide, the type of work matters. So this example from Benin was from a woman who was explaining how as long as she puts the good of her household at the center of everything she does, her husband will allow her to spend her time as she pleases. And so that might be, for instance, like going to a training that would benefit the household because she might learn something about you know, increasing the productivity of her crops, versus just her personally wanting to learn more. So it kind of depends on how the work is framed and who it benefits. That can help women, you know, exercise their agency. And then lastly, some key takeaways. Overall, being disempowered in work balance is particularly seen as a barrier to participating in other activities. And so in the qualitative work, a lot of women lamented how, you know, because they have to spend so much time doing this, they can't earn income. So they are motivated, but they just don't feel like they have the time to act on it. Fortunately, though, there's some evidence that interventions may change inter-household dynamics that would help give women more agency over their time. So in this example from Ethiopia, a woman is explaining how after her husband had participated in some trainings, he had a better understanding of women's situations, and then he was more willing to help with domestic chores and free up some of her time, which he wasn't willing to do previously, pre-training. And then lastly, what women really want is more control over their time, not leisure time. And so I really like this example from Malawi because it's quite extreme. But in this case, a woman explained how she really wanted to start a business and her husband was not supportive of her doing that. He just, you know, thought it would take away from her ability to complete all her existing chores and whatnot in the household. So she ended up divorcing him and starting the business anyway. So she really, you know, it's an example of her really going to great lengths to choose how she spends her time, which was on her business, and earn income. So that's it for discussing the qualitative pro-WEAI in relation to work balance today. So here's just some citations if you're curious about, you know, reading more about our findings overall. But thanks so much to everybody. I'm sure there's a lot of questions in the chat and I will go through and review them once I'm done presenting here, and I'll hand it back to Ara now. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. It was a great session. Thank you so much. So I'm actually looking at the time and then we have about like 3-4 minutes to spare if any of the WEAI team members who saw the questions in the chat box would like to pick up for clarification or any discussion, feel free to do so. Or Jessica, or Agnes. But if you're good for now, then we can always move on and then can spend a little more time in the discussion group.
Thanks, Ara. I would say I'm doing my best to respond to all these questions, as well as what and others are chiming in as well. But I don't know if Agnes or others who are monitoring the chat see any big gaps in topics that I've been missing. Apologize for all my brief responses, but there are many of them to address. So.
You're doing great. Thanks.
Thanks,
Jessica. Yes. Oh, and thank you for mentioning the Weia side events that we're planning to have next week. I know that Hazel is going to also remind at the end of this whole session, but yeah. So if you have a more question you want to discuss with the whole team, in-depth questions or something that you would like to spend more time on, always come to the session, the side events, and we'll be there. Okay, so if nobody wants to add anything else, I think we can move on to the next session, which is stretch break. So before we start the group discussion session, we'll have about 3-4 minute stretch break, and Simone will guide us through some of the stretching exercises. But please don't leave your desk, because we need to start
already doing it.
Yes, I know that if we start doing it, everybody just go to the bathroom and then go get coffee. But please do not, because yeah,
very brief.
yes. So please stay with us, and over to you, Simone.
Okay, great. Well, we love to see all this engagement in the chat. We can't wait to engage with you all in small group discussions in a few moments. And right now we would like to engage some of our muscles, because we've been engaging our brain. So right now I would like everyone to stay at their desk. And if you are capable, and if you to sit with your feet flat on the ground, and your seat is, your seat bones are balanced in your chair, and just kind of try to take a nice deep breath and straighten up your back and move your shoulders back. Take some deep breaths as you roll your shoulders back. You may have been hunching over the screen many hours this week. Now roll your shoulders forward. And take some nice deep breaths and long inhales and long exhales. Maybe roll your head to one ear, put your ear on one shoulder. Roll it forward and put it on the other shoulder. And do that a few times. If you feel comfortable rolling your head all the way around, but don't overexert yourself. We don't want any injuries. There's still many hours to look at your computer this week. All right, and now when you feel like you've had your neck and your shoulders kind of stretched out, I'd like everyone to take a deep breath and bring your hands up above your head and reach towards the sky while inhaling. Deep inhale, and bring your hands together as you exhale slowly. Bring your hands to your chest in a sort of a little prayer position. And one more time, take a deep breath in and stretch your fingers to the sky while you're inhaling, taking a deep breath and filling your lungs. And as you exhale, I'd like you to take one hand and bring it down and keep one hand in the air and just sort of reach to the side a little bit. Stretch your rib cage. Inhale and take an inhale and take a nice deep breath. All right, and exhale. And as you exhale, bring your hand back up. Okay, and we're all up in the middle now. All right, another deep breath in and stretch. And as you exhale, lower your other arm and kind of stretch your other side of your ribs. Oh, maybe you feel some pops and little cracks and stuff. All right, and bring your hands back up together in the sky, reach in the sky, and then bring your hands down. Yeah, and then one last part. All right, I'd like you to take, on video, it's always funny, like right hand, left hand. So let's take our right hand, whatever right hand is your right hand, and bring it behind your hip and sort of place it on your chair or your seat behind you, sort of by your hip, and take your left hand, whatever's the opposite hand to the left hand, and put it on your right knee, opposite hand to opposite knee, and start kind of slowly, softly stretching and turning your shoulders and start looking towards the back of the room or the wall to the side of you. Just kind of give your lower back a stretch. Maybe take a deep breath, kind of hang out there for just a moment. Maybe you feel something. Give. Something's got to give sometimes. Hopefully not too much. And when you're ready, come back to the center. All right, make sure your feet are still evenly on the ground. And then we're going to do it on the other side when you're ready. All right, so we're going to take left hand, whatever the left hand is for you, and put it behind your hip on your chair, and take your right hand and put it on the opposite knee to your left hand, your right hand to your left knee. And again, just sort of swivel your shoulders, keep your feet planted on the ground. Take some deep breaths, trying to, twist your core, twist your hips a little bit, stretch out that part of your body. It gets a lot of stress sitting for many hours every day. And when you're ready, I'd like you to come back and just take a moment. You don't have to stretch anything right now. Just kind of sit, take one deep breath, and exhale slowly, and just sort of feel a little bit lighter, I hope, and ready to dive into the next part of this session. Okay, thank you all. I hope you all feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit more engaged in other parts of your body than just your brain. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Simone. It feels really nice to stretch the body a little. This session is always well received by the participants, so it was great. Okay, so as mentioned, the next session will be a group discussion on how to interpret the quantitative and qualitative data. Ruth will give us a brief intro about this session before I send you all off to the groups. So Ruth? Ruth, when you were talking, I can share the group notes doc in the chat box. Yeah, you're muted.
Thank you, Ara. Then I don't have to share. So that's great. So we're now going to go through an exercise of putting it all together. And in your packet of preparatory materials, you should have received this PowerPoint that Ara will be showing in a few seconds. And what we did is we created a made-up case of qualitative and quantitative data for you to interpret. The quantitative data is taken from the materials of the case study that we used in the final exercise of the ProWEAI distance learning package. So that shouldn't be a big surprise to you. What we've done is we've added in, well, it's actually a real seasonality calendar from one of the case. So yeah, we'll, so go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. So this is a hypothetical case, as I said, of a project that seeks to empower women through new ag technologies and gender sensitization training. If you go through to the next slide, you'll see the time use data from the distance learning course. Or no, this was to be consistent with the data from the distance learning course. The next slide is the quantitative indicators. We're going to focus on the work balance indicator that's highlighted in red. Next one shows we're revisiting the seasonality calendar that Emily just showed us. And go to the next one. we have now excerpts from or a summary of an in-depth interview with an empowered woman. And then on the next is an in-depth interview with a disempowered woman. And then the next is a key informant with the project, a member of the project staff. And the final one is a women's focus group, excerpts of quotes from that. The exercise we're going to do on the last slide, we'll break into some groups and just discuss what overall picture emerges from these qual and quant data regarding how the relationship between project intervention and time use. So you can discuss, how does the project seem to affect time use, and how does time use affect participation in the project? And then looking back at the seasonality calendar, would your answer about this change if you knew that the survey data was collected in February or June or July? And what kinds of suggestions could you make based on this data? Without further ado, we'll go into the breakout rooms. There will be an IFPRI person in each of the breakout rooms, so you can ask your further questions there. And now we get to actually hear your voices. So we're looking forward to some more verbal interaction. So thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth. So I just create the breakout groups. So we will have 4 breakout rooms with 8 people in each group, including 2 Weia resource people. So if you have additional questions about any of the things that Ruth just gone through, I think you can just ask in your group. And we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes to discuss. So I'm going to send you all reminders a couple of times during the discussion. So you can just check on that. Okay, so I guess we are all ready. Yes.
Could you also reshare again the PowerPoint?
Oh, yes, I can, but they are also already in the agenda. Are they also in
the same?
Yes, agenda. So yeah, you all have the Google doc with the agenda and then all the materials, right? So
yeah, so can you reshare, because I think that one does not show up if people came late.
Sure, I can just share that right now. So the one that I just shared was the Google doc notes, the group notes, so that you can take notes there. And this one I'm just sharing now is the agenda with the session materials. And in that doc, you can see the quant and qual slides link to the Dropbox documents, the PowerPoint slides. So you can open that up with the group notes and you're all set. All right, are we good? Okay, good.
Yes,
all right, so all the rooms are ready. I'm going to start opening all the rooms. So enjoy.
So were you asking people to volunteer to discuss a summary of what happened in the discussion groups?
Yeah, so we're not going to do we're not going to go through each group just to hear what they discuss. It's more of just individuals, your just key takeaways from your group discussion, or from any other sessions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you're more comfortable putting that in a chat, you're also welcome to do that if you don't want to do it orally, but either is fine.
I think we have Julia's hands up.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi all. Yes, so I was just giving a short summary of what we said. I think one of them, I was not the note taker, so probably there is something more, I don't recall everything, but I hope to recall at least something. So one of the main point was to include the men when doing trainings as well. To have a better context and generally, to empower more women as well, so they can understand well how the process is and how it works. We said that seasonality matters because this is going to change the workload of women. depending on the season in terms of agriculture. So if it's the planting season, if it's the harvesting season, is going to change. So maybe we have to, we need to do the training when actually women don't work that much, when they have more time. Then we were talking also about more practicalities. So for example, giving any incentives for the women to come there. So if they can, for example, if they cannot work and that day of working is the moment when they actually, get the food for the family for the entire day. So if we do the research at that point, if we do the training in that moment, maybe we can give, a common meals or something so they can share with the families. So we were talking also about all of these, about childcare, this stuff. And then we talked about, what else? I don't remember. Maybe someone else from the group can also, include some other points from the chat, from what we said in the chat. But those were kind of the main ones, I think. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Julia. We have another hand up. Nozomi, wanna go next?
Yes, I just want to comment about this session and also the methodology about this WEAI, pro-WEAI. I was so impressed. I'm a social anthropologist. Usually, I'm collecting data from qualitative perspective. My epistemology was very different from economist. That today I did precision and how economists quantify women's empowerment and how quantitative and qualitative research can go together. This is really rich. I think to build this methodology, there are a lot of effort from both qualitative and quantitative researchers, and I highly appreciate it, and I'm so excited to do this work in Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nozomi. Ruth, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm just so pleased, Nozomi, because it's really, I find it really exciting. Even when the two don't agree, pulling at what are the tensions and what does that tell us, is I just find it really exciting.
Thank you. I was about writing email to you about to ask your opinions. So it's good to hear from you. Thank you.
It sounds like you all had a nice discussion in your group. Yeah. Okay. I think we have time. One more person. Anyone?
It looks like Jan had a point in the chat, but did you want to raise that verbally, Jan, or if not, we could just address it. I think
sure, no problem.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I thought this example was, in this kind of a case, your qualitative data are supportive of your quantitative findings. But I'd like to just sort of raise, what do you do when they don't? And do you go back and do more qualitative work, or do you just attribute it to non-representative sample sizes? I would just like to get your experience. You've done so many of these, and I'm sure in many cases they don't agree. So you gave us an easy case today, but what about the other situation?
Can I come in on that?
Yes, please.
Yes, and I have found the places where they don't agree to be sometimes the most enlightening. I gave a case in our group from Nepal where the qualitative work really says daughter-in-laws are working much harder, and the survey data says that there's no statistically significant difference between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. I think we did a lot of probing, and I have a really excellent anthropologist partner in Nepal who kept challenging us on this. And what we came to is that mother-in-laws are still doing a lot of work, and daughter-in-laws may be underestimating that. But the thing is that the mother-in-law controls the daughter-in-law's work. So it's not just the amount of work, but the control over that work that matters. Control over labor matters. And so now we are coming up with a whole suite of, a set of indicators on control over time, which may you know, I think that's going to be a really important thing going forward. Not just the number of hours, but the control over it. And so that's where I think looking at the inconsistencies between the qual and quant can take us forward.
Thanks, Ruth. Just
Great
one
point,
last.
great point. Interesting.
Thank you, Jan. So we have one hand up. I think this is going to be our last comment from Tanya. Go ahead.
Just to mention that we one of the things we discussed was noticing how there is this kind of self-perpetuating cycle of daughters being pulled in to cope with the extra work, and are we, you know, whether we're capturing that, and then other unintended consequences as well was discussed, and the kind of unintended harm and how we measure or look out for or find out about that in the interventions. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess, I mean, I'm sure everybody's enjoying this discussion and it's really good, but unfortunately our time is up. So I think we're going to hand it over to Hazel to close today's Learning Lab session. Over to you, Hazel.
Thank you. It's lunchtime here, so you might hear some noise. So thank you, everybody. I mean, so clearly what I learned is that 2 hours is very short and we wanted to do a deep dive. So I hope we did the content some justice. So just to say that there were maybe, before I point you to resources, I just wanted to emphasize kind of two things. One is on the qual quant and how they work together. We really tried to bring that in here. I think that's often, you know, when people see the Weia and look at the quantitative results, they kind of don't see all the suite of tools that are part of that. And I hope in the case that made you appreciate how looking at just one or the other gives you an incomplete picture. So there's one takeaway from this session I would like you to bring with you. It would be that. The second is on modifications. And to what extent can you modify or adapt? And I would say it's a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, you know, modification can help you use the tool in a very context-specific way, adapting it to your project, adapting it to your setting. But be careful, because modifications come with pros and cons, right? If you modify in a way that disallows calculation of indicators as stated in the standard methodology, then that takes away comparability. If comparability is something you care about, then don't do that. If you don't care about that, then I guess there are other ways, so that kind of opens up other things for you. But I would just say, you know, be careful about how you're deviating. If you do plan to deviate, just be very careful, document everything, do sensitivity analysis and all that. Where to go for resources? We have the weia.ifpre.info resource center online. All our protocols are there, our questionnaires, our do files, you find papers there. So everything that's public, you know, all our resources are there. So that should be your first point of entry. Like everything is there. We even have a glossary over there. So just go there first. And then also just to say that those of you who want to connect with other users, Weia users in globally, you're welcome to join 2 side events as part of the ANH Academy conference. We have one happening on Tuesday, June 29th. This is 16:55 BST or 11:55 Eastern in the US, as well as on Thursday, July 1st, 12 noon BST and 7 a.m. Eastern. So we hope to see you there, and we'll be happy to connect with the rest of you in the side events and see you in the future ProWEAI events. So that's all from me. Thank you. And I guess we pass back to Zachary or Ara.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. I just have a few closing remarks just before we head out. I'm launching a poll really quick, and that is just a really quick evaluation for the session. Just 3 short, I think there are 3 short questions. So we'd really appreciate your time and attention to that poll. I also want to flag, we have some really exciting new resources that we want to share with you all that we're announcing this ANH week. And so first we have a new teaching resources webpage. And so that has a ton of great links to online open access teaching materials centered around teaching agriculture, nutrition, and health interdisciplinarity. So take a look at the link that Lauren has just shared in the chat. We also have another initiative that's just being launched and is now available also on our website to browse. We have a mentoring scheme for members to join. And so please take a look at that as well. It's a really great way to see how established folks in the field have, the journey that they had throughout their careers. And if you are interested in participating, you can also register your interest there as well. Lauren has also pasted the link. Thanks again so much, and have a great rest of your day. We look forward to seeing you on other ANH events.